For it's the Pot Black Cup. Now you may not know that Steve Davis has won this particular little beauty 3 times, and in fact he's one of 3 men, 2 of whom are sadly no longer with us. Australia's Eddie Charlton and John Spencer, who sadly passed away only 8 weeks ago. In July, the snooker world was saddened by the news of the death of John Spencer after a battle against stomach cancer. Spenny was world champion in 1969, 71 and 77, and 3 times Pot Black winner. He was as renowned for his sportsmanship and sense of humour as he was for his skill and touch at the table. And together with Ray Reardon and Alex Higgins, was a key figure in the sport's huge rise in popularity in the 60s and 70s.
Those are the days.
Well, I'm gonna
You've got to do it.
Same.
You have to do it.
Although I might do it again.
Well, yes.
Obviously, I've got tremendous respect for him. Wonderful world champion, 3 times world champion, great ambassador for the sport, a wonderful gentleman, a lovely human being. I went to his funeral. It was very sad. He will be sorely missed by snooker.
It's quite well known that John Spencer was the first player to make a competitive 147 at the professional level, but unfortunately the television cameras were on a tea break. That was back in the 70s. I made the first televised one that was actually shown against John Spencer. I don't remember him ever moaning or complaining about it. He shook my hand at the end and we had a glass of champagne at the end of the match, and you know, he didn't have a side to him. You know, he was always he'd be very respectful of anybody's abilities, and was a great sportsman as well. He didn't like bad sportsmanship.
Spencer's later career was blighted by the eye disease myasthenia gravis, but he kept playing until 1992, also working as a television analyst and sports commentator. An active member of the sport's governing body, he served as chairman for 6 years.
138.
All the while, he campaigned tirelessly to raise awareness and funds for the Myasthenia Gravis Association. And last year, he discounted advice from his doctors to take part in a charity skydive with the Red Devils.
I played him in the Pot Black final, as a matter of fact, back in the 20s it must have been, and my main memories are when I played him when he was sort of finishing towards the end of his career, and he never ever complained about what happened. He wasn't playing at his best, you know, but he's very sporty in that respect.
I think the tribute that he would have liked more than anything else was the fact that he loved life, class act. That was John Spencer.
I think that's how we'll always remember Spenny, with that big grin on his face. What do you think, John, will be the greatest contribution that Spenny will have made to the game?
He was of that new era, wasn't he, that went to the Crucible and started off and brought snooker to prominence, obviously with the Pot Black trophy we've been talking about. He was probably one of the greatest long potters. He just started the long pot enough, and he could big screw backs, and he always played with a smile on his face. I remember seeing him as a very young lad. I went to the Crucible and he was playing indeed the year he won there. And I always remember that match he played there with Cliff Thorburn, I think it was. And a great break builder. 2-piece cue, that was one of the things he first introduced. Those they were made in Japan. He started playing with one of those, never been heard before. But a great player and break builder, and he was in my camp when I won the World Championship, so I'll always remember him fondly. I passed messages over to Jean, his wife, a couple of days before. I was sadly on holiday when he passed away, but I spoke to her a couple of days beforehand, and I hope he got the message I sent.
Well, I'm afraid we have some other very, very sad news to impart today, because snooker's lost one of its true characters, another one of its true characters, Peter Dyke. Now, you may not know Peter very well, but he died sadly this morning. He was in world promotions, and he was the driving force behind taking the World Championship to the Crucible in the 70s. He was a huge personality. Everybody here loved him. He was great fun to be with, and we're extremely sad at his passing, and I'm sure we would all send our condolences and our love to his lovely wife, Sheila. Peter Dyke, who passed away, that one. But we're concentrating now on snooker, because it's the final of the Pot Black Championship. This is the trophy, this little trophy that they're all playing for. But this little trophy has behind it an awful lot of history. And let me show you some of the names since 1969 who have won this trophy. You've got the likes of Ray Reardon. He was the first, and the Welshman came back to do it a decade later. You've got John Spencer, Eddie Charlton. They both claimed the Pot Black hat trick. And men like Graham Miles and Perry Manns, Cliff Thorburn, Terry Griffiths, Doug Mountjoy, Jimmy White and a certain Mr Davis became household names, thanks in part to their success in this one-frame Championship, and Steve Davis is with me. Are you filled with nostalgia when you look back through those names, and how influential do you think Pot Black was for the game of snooker?
Well, it does bring back a lot of names, and I think in the early days it was the way that you got yourself work. The likes of Dennis Taylor and Graham Miles, specifically those two I seem to remember, then became household names overnight because they did well in Pot Black, and all of a sudden they could start earning the bread and butter on the exhibition circuit. And that was the way most players made any money at all, was by doing exhibitions. And that's why the older players had to learn how to do trick shots and things like that, because that was at least 90% of their earnings. But of course Pot Black led to other things, because BBC decided that, hey, this is getting good figures. Why don't we try, somebody down the line thought, why don't we try showing a whole tournament spread over a couple of weeks? And then it started, the snowball started, and here we are. I mean, having had a rich history of snooker and a phenomenon in this country, that a table ball sport became so big.
And when you think about the influence that the game's had now, you are extraordinary in that 2 decades later you're still playing against men who are now, well, half your age and even younger. How do you compare the standards, not particularly in this tournament, but overall with those early days?
Well, there's a big X factor in asking the question, you know, are you deteriorating, are the other players getting better? And the same goes for, say, Stephen Hendry. Actually, what's happening is that the standard's always improving in sport if it's competitive. If a game sort of dies off, it could go downhill. But those early days of Pot Black, as we see from what we're watching out here in this tournament, you know, the frames were taking 35, 40 minutes, and they were hoping they sped up a bit. Players just didn't make breaks. Okay, the cloths were a bit thicker, as Willie Thorne says in commentary occasionally, so the balls didn't spread apart. The reds never spread apart in the triangle as quickly. But players are so much more sophisticated now, and they're walking the high wire better, the tightrope walk of knocking in the difficult balls. They're more immune to the pressure.
Well, the high wire act is just about to start again.